Hi there, thanks for joining me. In this video, we'll take a look at the new version of Painter, X3. X3 is the upgrade from 12, and it's got a lot of cool new features. I'm just going to show you how easy it is to get started with it if you've never worked with Painter before. So once you have Corel Painter installed, the first thing that'll come up when you open the program is this little window here, and this just has some helpful suggestions on how to get started. I generally don't use this, so I just uncheck this box to turn it off so that it doesn't pop up all the time. But if it's helpful for you to keep, you can go ahead and just leave it for now. You can close it temporarily by closing this little X here. And the way to get started is to create a new canvas. So in Corel Painter, everything that you can see here is your interface, and your interface is basically all of your tools and all of your art supplies. And so you have to put a canvas or a piece of paper into your workspace here. So to do that, we go to File and New, and this asks us what size do we want our canvas or our paper to be, and we can name it too. So we can just call this Art. We don't need to give it a very sophisticated name here. And then we can choose to measure this canvas in pixels, which is a unit of measurement for computer graphics, or we can change that to inches or centimeters, any of these other things. I prefer to use inches if I'm working with things that I intend to print, because it's just easier to fit it to a standard frame size or standard mat size. You can set your settings here, but I recommend setting your resolution first. I'll recommend in my video description here a video about resolution, because it's kind of a lot to explain. But basically for now, let's just go ahead and set it to 72, and I recommend you watch that video to learn what a better resolution is for printing. But this is just going to be an example. We'll set it to 72 here, and then we'll go ahead and set our width and height. We'll set our height to 11 inches and our width to 14, and then we'll go ahead and click OK. So now we've made a piece of paper or a canvas that is 14 inches wide by 11 inches tall. So the first thing that you'll get is you'll get this little window that's popped out here, and it might look a little different if you're working on Mac, but I find that working in this window isn't really that much fun. So what I like to do is I like to switch the screen mode to make it full screen. So on a PC I would click this maximize button, and on a Mac you would click the maximize button on the Mac, and that'll just put it in full screen mode. You can also go to Window and you can do screen mode toggle here, and that'll toggle it in and out of screen mode. So now that you can see your canvas, you may have to move it around to the left or right or up or down, or you might also want to zoom in and out depending on how big your screen is. The screen I'm working on here is a big TV. It's a 47-inch TV like you would watch movies on. So I've got a whole lot of space to have my tools all kind of spread out here. So to move our canvas, we'll hold down space on our keyboard, and that gives us this hand icon. Or you could optionally click on the hand icon here, the grabber, and while the grabber is active, while you have space held down, you can tap and drag with your pen or use your mouse if you don't have a Wacom tablet, and you can move your canvas around anywhere you want while you're holding space on your keyboard. If you want to zoom, you can go to the zoom tool here, the magnifier, and you can tap with your pen or click with your mouse while this plus icon is showing on your magnifier. And if you want to zoom back out, then you hold down Alt on your keyboard. You can also right click or use the right click button on your pen to enter some command dialogues here, and we can zoom in, zoom out, center image, zoom to fit, and actual size. So this can be pretty helpful. We can go to zoom to fit, and that'll fit the canvas as big as it can be on our screen without getting covered up by any of these palettes. You can also access these features here while the magnifier is active. If you wanted to rotate your page, you can do that with the rotate page tool just by clicking on it here, and you can tap and you can drag to rotate your page, and you can just double click to reset it back to its original orientation. So now that we know how to move our canvas around, let's get to the fun stuff. Let's look at how to go ahead and start using some of these tools. First of all, let's kind of arrange our workspace a little bit so that we can access some more useful tools and kind of get rid of some that we're not going to be using for this lesson. So for this navigator here, I don't really tend to use this. I'm just going to close it by clicking that X. I do use color and layers a lot, so I'm just going to go ahead and leave these here. I might scoot them over just a little bit so that I can see this slider bar in case I need to. And you may or may not have a little palette hiding down here like I do, but by default when I load Painter for the first time, this little palette comes up here. I don't use it anyways, but I'll just put it where I can see it in case I ever want to open it again. But for now, I'll just go ahead and close it. So, where to start in Painter? Well, first of all, if you want to do any painting on your canvas, you'll have to select your brush tool. And anytime your brush tool is selected, when you click or you tap in this canvas area, you're going to put down some color. And right now, I have the 2B pencil selected by default, and there's a blue selected by default. You might have a different brush and a different color selected. So let's just make sure that we're on the same brush here. So we'll click on this pencil icon, and this will let us open the brush selector, and we can choose from categories or mediums on the left, and then on the right in this panel are all the different brush variants, so all the different types of brushes that are within a certain category. So we're in the category of pencils currently, so this is showing us all of the different kinds of pencils that we can access here. So we'll go ahead and go with cover pencil. Let's set our color to black. So to pick a color, we have our color picker here. It'll let us pick pretty much any kind of color that we want. On this vertical axis here, we have value, which is dark to light. And then on the horizontal axis, we have saturation or color intensity. So we have gray and then muted to very, very bright, intense color. On the outside in this ring, we have the hue selector, and we can pick any kind of pure color hue here. Now what I recommend is not using this RGB color picker because it's really counterintuitive. It would be very difficult to pick a color using that. So let's click this little extra menu icon here, and let's choose display as HSV. HSV is hue, saturation, and value. So as I explained earlier, this is the H, hue. Saturation is this, the S. You can see how that bar is just moving back and forth. And then value is this axis here. So when you're picking colors, you need to think about all three of these things, and you need to set them independently from each other. I generally try to pick the hue first, so if I want a blue, I'll find, do I want this kind of blue or this kind of blue? There's lots of different kinds of blue. And maybe I want this one. And then how dark do I want it to be? Do I want it to be a dark blue or a light blue? Well, maybe I want it to be a light blue. Okay, well, how bright do I want it to be? And I'll go back and forth this way. So maybe I want it to be right about here. So you can also adjust these sliders if you prefer, if that's easier for you, and you can input numbers numerically here if that's easier for you. But for the most part, if you just kind of do these one at a time, it makes it much easier to pick a color. So now that we know how to pick color, let's take a look at just painting with it. So we'll just go ahead and go to black here. I'm just going to drag into the corner, and let's paint with our cover pencil that we have selected here. And you can see that it works a lot like a regular pencil would. And I'm drawing with a tablet here. You might have a Wacom tablet at home, and if you do, it'll make painting a lot more fun. You could also draw with a mouse, but it's extremely difficult. However, it can be done if you're just kind of playing around with the thing. But I do recommend getting even one of the most basic Wacom tablets available to you to draw with. That's kind of what you're supposed to do with this program. So if we want to resize our brush, we can do that in different ways. The first way is to just go to the size function here and either adjust it this way by dragging this bar to get a bigger or smaller brush, or you can input a value numerically. Another way that you can resize your brush is to use the bracket keys. Those are the keys that look like this on your keyboard. And if you hit the right bracket, then your brush will increase incrementally. And if you hit the left bracket, it'll decrease. Although the way I prefer to resize my brush is to resize it on the fly. And to do that, you hold down Control and Alt, and then you drag your pen. So I'm going to hold down Control and Alt, and then I get this plus icon here, and then I'm going to drag my pen, and I can get that size brush. And if I want a smaller brush, there we go. I can get any kind of size brush that I want very easily without having to go up here or hit these bracket keys. But if I do want to fine tune it, the bracket keys work very well. Or if I want a specific brush size, like let's say I'm doing line art or a comic book and I always want to be working with a diameter of 4, I can also set it numerically. So you have all those options there. If you would like to try some of the other brushes, you can just go through and kind of experiment. We can do the acrylics real quick just to show you a paint brush, and we can use some color here. You can use whatever color you want. The important thing to note is that this is not real paint. This is digital art, and you can mix these mediums together. I can put acrylic paint over pencil, and I can put chalk on top of acrylic, and it's no big deal. I don't have to wait for anything to dry, and it's not going to make a big mess like it would in real life. So you can use any combination of these mediums that you want. There are blenders, so you can blend your color together, and you can do just about anything. I mean, this is a really, really neat program, and just digital painting in general is just really fun, in my opinion. An important thing to remember is that there are a few different mediums here that generate their own special thing that's called a layer. And basically what that breaks down to is if I use something like real watercolor and I go through and I paint right now, what it's doing is it's just added a layer here. And if you have your layers palette visible, you'll see it added something called watercolor layer. So this is just a layer of paint that's on top of the piece of paper. It's on top of the paint that we've been painting here. So it's kind of separate, and I can take it and I can move it around too with my layer adjuster. So it's just this free floating layer of paint that I can move independently. However, it's a special watercolor layer, and you know it's special because you see this little additional blue shape here in the icon. If I create just a basic standard layer that's not a watercolor layer, the icon looks different. So you have to watch out for these watercolor layers, because if you try to do something like paint with a brush that's not a watercolor brush, like let's say a blender, you'll get this error dialog anytime you try to do something on a watercolor layer that's not with a watercolor brush. And so you might end up getting stuck and not being able to paint. Well, this is why. So if you're going to work with watercolors, just stick to watercolors, or try to just only use watercolors on watercolor layers. There's a little bit of confusion too. This watercolor here is different from real watercolor, so that might be a little confusing. There's also digital watercolor, which is also different. So just kind of watch out for that. I recommend if you're going to work with watercolor, just stick to real watercolor here, and then everything's fine. See, if I paint with a watercolor brush on this watercolor layer, I'm not going to get this error message. There's some other brushes that'll do that, like liquid ink will also generate its own layer. You can see there's a special liquid ink layer that's black, and if I try to do something with an oil brush or any other kind of brush on that layer, it won't let me paint. So I can switch to a different layer or make a new layer here, and then it'll let me paint because that paint's on its own layer. It's not interfering with this liquid ink layer. If I go back to the liquid ink layer, it won't let me paint. So you can kind of get hung up on some of this stuff. You have to watch out. If you want to just delete some of these layers, you can click this trash can, and it'll delete the selected layer. And then you can just get rid of it, and it won't bother you anymore. If we want to erase and clear the canvas, and one thing to mention, this layer says canvas, but this is just a layer. It might as well be called layer 0. It's not actually the canvas. The canvas is the area that we've predefined here. So, you know, this could actually be nothing at all. And if this happens to you and you click this eyeball, what this eyeball does is it's hiding the visibility of the layer, so it's making that layer invisible. And this checkerboard pattern is not a giant chessboard. It represents full transparency. So if you're seeing this checkerboard pattern at all, what that's saying is that you can see completely through whatever that is there that you're looking at. So you have to watch out for that. But if we want to erase, we can of course use the eraser. And that's probably not the most efficient way to erase. It might be fine for trimming things a little bit, making little fine tuning and adjustments. If you want to just erase everything, you can go to select all, or you can do Control A on your keyboard, and that'll put this little dashed line selection around everything. And then you can go to edit and clear. Now I have in my workspace for Painter 12, which is what I use more commonly, I have a keyboard shortcut where clear is set up as delete on my keyboard. So I just do a Control A and then hit delete, and then I can instantly clear my canvas. Last thing we'll look at is saving artwork. So let's make some artwork here real quick. Here's our artwork, and we're going to save this. So we'll go to File, and we'll go to Save, and we'll just go ahead and save this here. There's a few different formats available to you. I recommend when you're working on a project and it's a work in progress, or it's your original, save it as Painter Riff, because it'll make sure that any watercolor that you use and any layers will all stay the same when you save the file. If you don't save it as a riff and you save it as any of these other formats, it might flatten all of your layers, it might change your artwork, it just might do some things that you don't expect it to do. So if you're not familiar with any of these formats, just save it as riff for now. And if you decide that you want to print it and you want to make it a print ready file, do a save as and save a copy. So let's call this art print, because you can have more than one copy of one piece of artwork. And then we could save that as something like a TIFF if we were going to print, or if you're going to put it on the web, you would probably want to make it a little bit smaller first. You could save it as a PNG, or you could save it as a JPEG, and those are all good formats for the web. And I go into all that stuff in other videos. I'll post links in the description here. So I don't want this video to be too long, because there's lots of other videos out there you can watch to teach you some more complex things to do with Painter here. I appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. If you found it helpful, go ahead and take a second to like the video or share it on YouTube or Facebook, and that'll just make it easier for other digital artists out there to find this information too. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for my next video.